Good morning. You're tuned in once again to the International Connection, and we are in part 42 of the ongoing radio series on mind control. Today we are bringing you part 1 of an interview I conducted with Brice Taylor, a former Whitehouse-level mind control victim. She has been used as a sex slave for a number of U.S. presidents, foreign officials, and other power brokers while under the influence of mind control. She has been subjected to horrific torture and abuse beginning in her childhood at the hands of her family, and has been programmed at various military bases in the U.S. and at NASA. She is the author of a fictionalized account of her life, Starshine, One Woman's Valiant Escape from Mind Control, and since breaking free and recovering, has been in touch with hundreds of mind control survivors across the U.S. Here now is that interview. I'm speaking to Brice Taylor, a survivor of mind control. Welcome to the show, Brice.
Oh, thank you, Wayne.
And I wonder if you could start off by just giving a short description of who you are and your background.
Yes, actually, Brice Taylor is a pseudonym that I chose to protect myself and my children when I first started writing my book and putting it out. I'm a ritual abuse, government mind control survivor, and I have spent since 1985 working to heal from that and documenting what I was involved with at the highest levels within our government and internationally, as these people, leaders, are invested in bringing in the New World Order.
Okay. Who was responsible initially for your programming and conditioning?
Well, initially up close, my father primarily was at home on a daily basis, and my mother was also programmed to abuse and program me. My whole family was actually involved in my programming, including my grandparents on both sides, aunts and uncles, and my brothers. And as I grew older, like by the time I was 5, I was being taken to military bases in and out of California, and officials there were programming me, and later doctors at UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute in California, and places where there were NASA installations. I was also programmed.
Mm-hmm. And do you have remember when it started, the conditioning?
Yes, it started. I had actually some very early memories of being traumatized as an infant, and so it started when I was very, very young.
Now, what is the background of your family and your father and grandfather in particular?
My background is intergenerational ritual satanic abuse, and I know that because my father flew me back to Iowa where my grandfather lived, his father, and they involved me in satanic ritual there. And so it was then when I realized that my grandfather, who was a millionaire and politician, was involved and was also intergenerationally connected. So it's gone back in the family for generations as far as I know.
And was your family, did they learn in terms of the mind control programming, or was it strictly just being traumatized by the satanic rituals?
Well, I have no way of knowing what my parents' duties or jobs were during their earlier lifetimes, but I believe that that my father was made into a multiple through this severe satanic ritual that happened to him, and so I don't believe that he was like consciously operating with the programming of me. Where all parts of him knew what was going on, because I know he was a multiple. I watched him switch into child personalities and all sorts of different entities that he became during the years.
And was that caused by his father's conditioning of him?
Yes. My dad was severely tortured his whole life, had a very abusive childhood, and as I was healing and was able to look back, he even had several near-death experiences due to accidents that I think perhaps were his programming kicking up, as mine did later on.
Mm-hmm. And were there government or military connections in your family?
Not to the public, but certainly I was shuffled and taken into the government and military bases. But as far as being publicly connected, no. And
you know how they had made that connection with the military in terms of turning you over to them?
I believe that whole connection came with my grandfather, who I explained was a politician, and it seemed like once because I had never met him before in my life until I was nearly 10 years old, and my father flew me to Iowa to meet him, and it was shortly after that I started being connected to all sorts of famous politicians and entertainers and a lot of different people. So I believe it was through my grandfather.
Hmm. And was your grandfather himself conditioned as well, or did he was knowledgeable about the techniques of conditioning for the purpose of mind control? Right, and that I have no way of knowing. All I know is that he tortured me, and my father was there, and there were usually a lot of other men. But I have only my own experience, and what I believe to be the truth from my father is that although they created these heinous things and did all of this, that he was programmed also. But I can't answer that for my grandfather. I wasn't around him enough. Mm-hmm. And can you describe for our listeners what kinds of things were done to you that you remember as a child? Yes. And it's always hard for me to go back into this. It seems like no matter how many years go by, it's still very painful. But there was trauma done in the form of being stuck with pins and needles, being burned, hung by my feet, sometimes to crosses, spun, dropped off of tables as an infant, near drowning, sexual abuse and orgies, being drugged, food and sleep deprivation. And then adding to that, when I was around 5, was all of the military mind control that was done with very sophisticated instrumentation and chairs and electroshock, and that was all done to create a shattered psyche, I believe, that was used later for all these different personalities that were created for the mind control purpose. Now, were you used by the military? You were taken to bases as a child, or was that later on in your life? No, I was taken to bases in Long Beach and in California there as a child, and where they used very sophisticated means of light and sound combined with electroshock and drugs and all sorts of torture and hypnosis. So do you feel that your family had kind of laid in the base conditioning in terms of creating dissociation within you and then more sophisticated mind control later, or did they have were they programming you as well? My father absolutely was programming me as well, and what you said initially was true, that my father did the base programming and a lot of the trauma-based conditioning, and then these other layers of more sophisticated programming was brought in on top of that. Now, in terms of your father's public life, what was his public image? My father was a welder. He was, certainly was everything any father was supposed to be. He provided well for his family and was seen as a very charming man. And, no one had any idea, including his own physician, which, I'm not sure I understand that either, but that this man was creating as much torture and trauma on his children as he was. And was your mother a co-perpetrator, or did she have knowledge of what was going on? Yes, my mother also abused me, and in a lot of different ways. And I thought at the time when I was recovering my memory and going through all of this that my mother had done this on purpose. And it wasn't until I healed to the level to be able to go back and confront her, and I confronted her with all the different traumas and tortures and abuses, that I saw her cry.
And she said to me, "It's not that I don't believe you, it's just that I can't remember." And I felt very strongly that my mother actually, maybe at subconscious level, knew that she had participated, however she couldn't remember. But she wasn't discounting what I said, which was very unusual for most survivors. Usually their parents say this never happened. My mother did not do this. In fact, she went on to help fund financially my book when I was running for my life and had no source of income. So she's helping even today, although she still only cries and has not any of her own memory.
Do you have memories of your mother being involved in the cult activity as well?
Yes, my mother, I have memories of my mother being tortured and traumatized in satanic rituals that were done at some churches that we went to, and night torture and trauma. My mother was a battered wife. She doesn't remember a lot of it, but my father battered her, and some of the personalities he had were abusive and others weren't, and so my mother was absolutely tortured, and I know that she was programmed sophisticatedly in order to deliver me oftentimes even to the airport late at night or early in the morning when I was being used internationally and within and with high-level leaders in our own government and entertainers. And she doesn't remember any of that. However, to this day, she has trouble driving to the airport and doesn't understand why it's so frightening for her. So those are the kind of indications to me that she knows, but she can't remember because of programming.
Has she attempted to get help for herself in terms of therapy?
My mom did, and my mom is nearly 80 years old, and she said to me, I'm afraid that I'll come apart and I won't be able to function, and because she watched me become severely dysfunctional where I couldn't even take care of myself or anybody else in order to heal, and that she said that she felt her greatest help would be able to help me financially and to be able to be there with my children who I am not able to have any or not much contact with at this point. So my mother is a victim, and now that I've done my complete healing and realized that my life with my children was very similar to the one that she led with me, I have some very deep compassion for her and wish that in her time it would have been for her to heal, but I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it took for me to go through the healing process. It was years, and it was over $250,000 worth of therapy and body work and all sorts of healing modalities. So I understand what it has taken in the past to heal and what it would take for her as an older person. Well, I was in therapy daily. So for my mom, right now, my mother is an incredibly strong person. She, even in her late 70s, is working in the capacity that she can, and it's pretty miraculous, actually.
Now, when you were a child, did you attempt to tell anybody about the abuses, or were you even somewhat aware? Or
well, it's interesting that you asked that, Wayne, because when I was deprogramming and reintegrating, I had a lot of memories, and one of the ones I'll tell you specifically that explains this issue is that I had a personality in elementary school that was programmed to do child pornography, and the way that it was done was that I was taken out of my classroom at school, in my elementary school, in order to go to be taken what they called choir practice, which my church was very close locally, and so what they did was take me out of class to be taken to the choir director's home to practice choir during school time. And what ended up happening was once we got there and put on our choir robes, the whole thing turned and changed, and we stopped singing and started going downstairs in the basement to be filmed in pornography and all sorts of heinous ritualistic pornographically everything filmed with all kinds of equipment, filming equipment. And this one day, what had happened was that by the time I was taken back to school with the other children, I had, for some reason, not switched out of that personality. And so I went to the school principal's office, and I told her that this had happened, and I was talking in all these terms, with sexual language and all kinds of things that she found very distasteful. And I remember her shaking her finger at me and saying, stop talking like this. This is disgusting. Children shouldn't be speaking like this. And so I got punished for that, as I did lots of different subsequent times when I attempted to tell what was going on. I always ended up getting punished. So yes, I did attempt to tell, and whether this woman, the principal, was herself programmed, which I have since learned through my own experience that oftentimes there'll be a whole web of people in a community, that the professionals, the educational system, the church system, and everyone in that community will be programmed and have been ritually abused, and they attend rituals at night without even knowing it in an attempt to keep the whole community traumatized and programmed. So yes, I did try to tell, and it took until very late on in my life for people to start listening.
Did this principal inform your parents of what you were telling her? And where did you grow up?
I grew up in California in Woodland Hills. It was in Southern California, which is about 20 minutes inland from Malibu.
And do you know if, as a child, you were displaying signs of abuse that perhaps teachers could have picked up on?
Yes, looking back now, just even that example that I explained to you, where I had knowledge of sexual behavior and language that were well beyond the understanding of a child. I was always labeled as mischievous, getting in trouble in school, acting out. I was always the class clown. I think I did have even physical signs that teachers today would possibly pick up, and probably even the difference in my personalities where it had to have shown. I mean, I had obvious switches where I was switching in and out of different personalities. I know that because when I reintegrated, there were a lot of different school personalities that had been created to handle school. And so I'm sure that when teachers and other adults begin to have more information about dissociative identities disorder and all of this abuse, that they will have the eyes to see.
Now, when did you first realize that you were subjected to mind control?
Actually, the memory of the actual mind control involvement started to come to light in 1988 after several years of thinking that I was crazy and having the accidents and all of that. So it was 1988 that I began realizing that there was something more than I was just crazy and nuts and confused.
So you had memories of the ritual abuse before that then?
In 1985, I had a head injury. I had a head-on collision where my head went through the windshield of the car. And what that did was it allowed me to access both sides of my brain for the first time in my life, and I began having memories, very, very frequent memories of all sorts of abuse that came in such a way that it was difficult for me to continue to process it all. There was just so much of it. There were years of memories that came flooding in. And as my programming dictated, when those memories initially in 1985 started coming in, I just thought I was crazy, as I was programmed to believe that if anything came up that I would just think I was crazy. And so in 1987, I had another accident on the same date as the head-on collision, where I broke my back and smashed my head again riding a horse. It was on April 12th at 9:15 in the morning, which was the same time as my 1985 head-on collision. And the result of that accident was more vivid, very vivid flashback memories that came in the form of visual flashes, body memories where I felt agony in my body, felt drugged in very specific places in my body, had pain that once I learned through my daily therapy that I learned to begin to process that and what that all meant. And I'd like to explain, too, that during this time I was in school working towards my master's degree in clinical psychology to be a psychologist when all of this memory started breaking through, which made me have to quit school before I graduated. But it gave me a lot of information about the psychological process and what I would need to go through to heal.
Now, it seems really unusual that you would have the two accidents on the exact same day and time. Do you feel that they were arranged, or at least the second one was arranged?
I believe that it was definitely arranged. And I believe that because what happened in 1991 on April 10th, which was 2 days before this anniversary of the accident date, I received a $1 bill in my wallet that had programming numbers and the date April 12th written across it. So when I showed it to my therapist, they realized that this was intentional and was, it actually, all the times they ever sent things in to me like that, it was just another validation of reality for me.
So why do you think they would have, I guess, do you feel that they had programmed you for you to ride into? It was a tree that you had collided with the second time?
I think I was programmed to have an accident if I became, dangerously close to remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that once I had the first accident, that they may have tied the second one to it in an attempt to kill me. I really don't know that. I know I was still being used. And I continued to be used even when I thought I was free in 1991 and 1992 and even into 1993. So I believe they were attempts to injure me to the point that I couldn't function. I don't have all the answers.
Now, from what you know from other survivors' experiences, do you feel that that's a common technique for killing people if they do to come too close to remembering in terms of having them collide?
I do. I think that that as people are educated in all of these awarenesses, that in time it'll be able to see more clearly what has happened. But I received letters from survivors. It began just nationally, and now I receive letters from all over the world from survivors who have had all kinds of head injuries, strokes, all kinds of programmed accidents. But fortunately for all of us, and unfortunately for our controllers, what it has done is it's actually made the brain barriers easier to access and to remove some of the amnestic barriers, so that people that are having these accidents are beginning to remember more and more.
Yeah, just in the news recently, the accidents that Michael Kennedy and Sonny Bono have just had with skiing into a tree sounds very familiar, and that's what immediately came to my mind.
Yes.
Very curious. How did you then manage to break free of their control, and at what point did that happen?
Well, what I did was I was in daily therapy from 1987 on, and sometimes twice a day. So I was writing memories at home. I was writing memories in therapy. I was drawing. I was having body work. I was doing just about everything to heal. And so I had healed and began to integrate a lot of my personalities when in 1991, as I just explained, I received that $1 bill, and my wallet with the programming codes and my accident date written on it. And at that point, I had connected with Dr. Catherine Gould, who is a therapist in California who has worked for years with children who have DID and have been ritually abused. And I met her actually when I was in school to be along my venture to be a therapist, and so she started giving me information as I was asking her questions about programming. She would just say, well, I'll be here or there, and so she was able to give me a little information, because my therapist, no one that was around me, both of my therapists had never heard of ritual abuse or worked at all with anyone with multiple personality disorder. So no one really understood that was working with me what I was talking about. And so once I realized that there was such a thing as mind control, the programming started, just the parts of me that knew about the programming began filling up volumes of journals with listing my specific programming and how it worked, and drawing pictures that I share in workshops that I do. And so I began to understand that there was a lot more to all this than I could ever even imagine, and I was afraid for my life, and I was afraid for my children's lives, and I didn't know what to do. So my therapist helped relocate me to the island of Kauai, and I went there and was only going to spend a week just trying to get clear on what I should do, because I started realizing that my ex-husband was also a victim of this, and that there was a lot more going on, and I didn't know what to do. So I went to this island and was thinking I would only spend a week, and I ended up there for 5 weeks before I returned in an attempt to rescue my children. But during the time I was there, I had a lot of memories of the higher level memories of my government and entertainer involvement. And so now, being on the island, I had no money and really very little support. I had a couple that helped me. And so I got a laptop or a word processor and lived very frugally and just wrote and continued bringing back the memories and writing every day and reintegrating. And so with all of that, I realized that I had been used at very high levels within our own government, and to help me to help combat the programming that said I was crazy, I began to be strong enough of my own mind and body to be able to recognize when people were sent in on me to access me, or to, I would be programmed to call back into a number, and I was advised to continue doing that until I was healthy enough to really break free. And so when I would call in, these men would be on the phone, and they validated my reality of what I was remembering in a way that I'm very grateful to them now, because I had no way of understanding before why men in suits would be following me in cars around L.A. and all over the place. It started making sense to me, and I was able to put it together. So in 91, I was healing at a rampant rate, but I was still being accessed, and I was still being used on the island. I was even still being prostituted along with my daughter on the island. And it was pretty devastating when I healed at that point and realized it, but I was still healing, and that's how I realized what was really going on.
Do you know up to what point that your perpetrators were using you up till?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I have the date right, but I believe it was actually until just before our current president was inaugurated. It was one of the last times that I was used.
And when you were dealing with the initial therapist that you had approached, you said they weren't really aware of the mind control techniques, but what kind of work were you doing with them? Were you doing memory work at that point?
Well, I started out working just doing psychotherapy and analysis, psychoanalytical, which is, it's absolutely insane to be doing that with someone under mind control, but they had no way of knowing. And so I was just doing straight psychotherapy. And the memories started flooding in from the accidents, the trauma, and as I began to feel safer that there was someone that, even if they didn't understand, my therapist looked at me all the time like I was nuts. I was just coming up with all this abuse and the childhood abuse came up first, and then the ritual abuse memories came on the heels of the sexual abuse, and then the government mind control stuff came.
So with working with those initial therapists, did you started remembering about the mind control back then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
And at the point where they had stopped using you, or you were able to avoid being used, was there something that you had done to prevent that, or what was the situation?
Yeah, actually I worked with a renegade member of the intelligence community who I lived with for a year and a half, and he was able to help me through identifying my codes, keys, and triggers, what my programming was, and we actually spent a year and a half in the house where he would trigger me, and I would just go into my room and write, and I have volumes of memory work where I would just go right back in, and because I had been programmed to have a photographic memory, and because it was traumatic memory is laid down differently than normal memory is stored, I was able to not only see and hear, but use all my senses to go back into these memories and document it all. And over time, there was no way that I had any information or could have known about all these top secret, still classified projects, or the level of political sophistication and interconnection of politicians and world leaders that I was used with.
Now, are you aware, or do you know how they would have programmed you to have photographic memory?
It was a hypnotic command done under hypnosis with drugs and specific personalities.
Now you have written a book about your account, Starshine: One Woman's Valiant Escape from Mind Control.
Yes.
And within that book, you mentioned about some electronic harmonics equipment to help with your memory retrieval and deprogramming. Could you describe that and other forms of technology that were helpful?
Yes. The harmonics equipment that I spoke about in the book was actually explained to me by this member of the intelligence community, that was some of the specific programming equipment that had been used to program people and that could be used to deprogram people. However, I have since then not ever been able to get anybody within the government, obviously, to bring this equipment out publicly, but I do have some very good hope for people that have been through this to heal, and the closest that I know of help for people, in fact, that I am now in the process of beginning to open a business of is EEG biofeedback. And I would like to give a little information about that.
Yes, please.
That there's a company in California that's one of many around the country. It's called EEG Spectrum. And basically it works, it's a way of a person working through with a computer game that's monitoring your own brain waves, where a survivor is able, or anyone, is able to begin to realize what brainwave state they are in. And most survivors usually are heavy theta access, where they're in theta a lot. And so basically what this does is it helps people to stay more into the beta, which is their conscious, alert awareness, and learn that way. But one of the beauties about EEG biofeedback is that however a person has been traumatized, which most all people born into these generations on the earth now have been traumatized in whatever way, is that the trauma begins to be encoded physically, and therapy alone over time doesn't affect a body-mind connection in a way that this EEG biofeedback reintegrates brain function so that the body-mind can begin to be dealt with. And I bought the equipment and began working with it with my daughter at home during a few months when I was able to have her, and it borders on being very miraculous. And of course, she was very afraid that it was like mind control, but it brought her out of catatonic states and made her be able to function in ways that she wasn't able to. So I would say that the EEG biofeedback equipment and technology is the closest I know to help victims with memory retrieval and deprogramming, where it's gentler, kinder, and without so much body pain, memory, and all of that. And I can give the 800 number for that if you'd like me to do that.
Why don't you go ahead?
It's EEG Spectrum, and there's affiliates all over the nation, and the number is 800-789-3456.
Now, with this kind of equipment, was it that you were able to or see your brainwave activity and then adjust your own kind of thinking to deal with it, or how did that work?
It's basically you're fed back reward, so it's like, I mean, on a very simplistic, it's operant conditioning, just like a rat in a maze. You're rewarded when Pac-Man goes and you're hearing the sound accompanied with the reward. It's reward that rewards your central nervous system, so it's not like someone has to really be intellectual or figure it out. It just the healing happens. And I've been working with children with ADD and ADHD, and often within 2 or 3 sessions, kids that are 10, 11 years old that have never been able to read are reading, and they're saying, "I can read." And children that are on Ritalin are coming off of Ritalin because they're able to manage their brainwave states. So children can do it, and adults can do it because it works with the central nervous system. It's very powerful, and I think it's very hopeful for the future.
I'd like to talk now about some of the techniques that they have used to condition and program you. Do you remember how hypnosis was used to control and program?
Yeah, it was used in just about all of my earlier programming, whether it was my father or programmers at, I was taken a lot to Disneyland or different places where fantasy was intentionally mixed with reality. And hypnosis was always used in conjunction with drugs, and often when I was at military bases or NASA installations, it was used in conjunction with very sophisticated chair and instruments that went over my head, that where I was given electroshock and the hypnotic commands with drugs that they know are very useful in allowing that hypnotic command to go deep within the subconscious mind.
And what was the purpose of the drugs? Was that to make you more open to hypnosis or other purposes? Well,
I think the drugs are used in a lot of different ways, and certainly not being very, I'm not a physician or a brain surgeon to know really how that all works, but I believe that the drugs were used a lot to keep the conscious mind out of the way in order to be able to take the programming to very deep levels.
Just open the subconscious.
Right.
Yeah. And And then specifically, what was the purpose of electricity? How did that, what factor did that play in the mind control?
As a child, the electricity, I was shocked at home by a bare electric cords. And then as I began getting a little older, cattle prods, and then stun guns as I was older still, and then later the high-tech electronic equipment at the bases. And I believe that's done for dissociation. As a person is shocked and traumatized, it affects, your whole energy field, and the trauma creates dissociation, which people are able to be programmed at very deep levels when your conscious mind's out of the way, and when you're in a dissociative state.
And then later on with the more sophisticated programming, what was the role of electricity?
I believe it's still the same thing. There's members of the intelligence community. There's ex-military people who, it may take 10 years, but they begin remembering being set in chairs with electroshock and drugs and hypnosis while they're being given the commands of what their assignments or jobs are to do. I think it's to dissociate you. And certainly I believe there's a lot more to be understood and learned about this as, more and more survivors are taken as credible sources of information, and what they, explain and what they've seen in the classified projects is brought to light in that way.
Do you feel that they had also used electricity to make you forget certain...
Oh, yes. In fact, a member of the intelligence community that helped me out told me that a stun gun is used and was used because they believed that it would erase memory on 20 minutes on each side of a memory. So when an event happened, they'd use a stun gun 20 minutes into it in order to erase 20 minutes before the event had happened and 20 minutes after. And they felt sufficient that would erase the memory. However, I was able to access memory because, I became a meditator, and I was able to access memory throughout all of it, through the electroshock, through the drug barriers. There really was nothing that erased my memory in ways they thought they did. That none of their techniques to erase memory was satisfactory. Their techniques have fallen very short, and I think that's why there's so many survivors who are remembering.
Now, when you were remembering this, and particularly the electricity, was it conscious memory, or did it come back as more body memories, or how did the memories appear? Of
the electronic abuse?
Yeah. And in general as well.
Right. It came back in all ways in every day of my waking hour. I really had probably 10 years of my life once I began healing was not my own either, because I was so busy remembering and documenting through writing what I was remembering. And so the memories came through by, like, things in the environment would trigger me. I would see something and it would remind me subconsciously of something, and I have a feeling, and so I would follow that feeling and that memory back into my own mind, and the memory would just be there. I also had flashbacks where during the flashback state, certainly information experiences are very clear and very vivid and seem as if they're happening even that day. Things that have happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. I recovered memory a lot through flashback states, and basically I kept a journal with me at all times, and anything that reminded me or triggered me or made me feel funny, I wrote about it. And over time, all these bits and pieces of information that I wrote about all fell into line, even the ages I was versus the age presidents were. When they were in office, everything all fit together in a puzzle, perfect picture that I couldn't have created if I had tried to.
Now, you mentioned the more sophisticated electronic technology, particularly at NASA and some of the military bases. Can you describe some of that, and do you know what effect that they were trying to have on you?
Right. A lot of that was being sat in a chair that looked like the NASA space chairs, where I would be strapped in, and a lot of the equipment that I imagine was used by the astronauts, they used on me. A lot of the spinning, a lot of the weightlessness, a lot of being put into sensory deprivation tanks, being subjected to a lot of the light and sound, along with electroshock. A lot of that where I was being delivered information like I'd have on headphones, and in one ear I'd be hearing one sound, and the other ear I'd be hearing other sounds. And I was programmed with tones, so that like a tone on a phone would have a specific meaning that would be subliminally and subconsciously connected with a command. And so, well, like when I was initially healing, when I would try to dial the phone and I would hit the numbers and I would hear the tones in my ears, it would scramble me, and I couldn't think straight and I couldn't function. And so it was a matter of going back and consciously realizing that these tones were connected to commands that I no longer needed to follow. And it took several years for that not to affect me. It still affects me. However, the equipment that they used oftentimes in the auditory was using one sound in one ear and one sound in another ear, which confuses the conscious mind and sends a message straight into the unconscious, which is a very powerful way of controlling a person.
Now, do you know what kinds of things that they deliberately did to prevent you from remembering?
Yes, I don't have my diagram with me right now, but off the top of my memory, they gave me programmed commands that should I begin remembering that I would become confused, or should I begin remembering that I would feel tired and fall asleep, or should I begin remembering I would have migraine headaches, and that I would have accidents, or that I would want to kill myself. And there were very specific ways to self-injure that I was taught, which I had to fight literally for a couple of years, all the self-injury programs, in order to stay alive, to get to the deeper levels of memory. So there was endless internal landmines of booby traps and programming that was intended to kill me or make me feel like I was crazy or insane. And then when you add to that all the people outside, my family that was programmed, that was all around me, and then the people that I was being subjected and perpetrated by that were the next layer around me, with all of that, it's nearly impossible to begin remembering unless you have a head injury or something happens that really shakes a person up. I also think that the continued trauma to myself, to my husband, and my children was one of the biggest forms of attempting to keep me under control, because that innate mother instinct is very strong and has been one that I've had to logically overcome in order to speak out, knowing that my children would be safer if I spoke out than if I kept silent. Let's see. There was also phone accesses to codes that, I would be called and people would say either program phrases to me or hit certain numbers on the phone, which the tones would then play in my ear. I mean, it's endless. Mm-hmm. It's endless. It was just a web.
Now, in terms of the actual programming that was done to you, was mainstream culture used in any way? You mentioned that you were taken to Disneyland, but were...
I was programmed with all the regular fantasy that children go through. I saw the Disney films and was heavily programmed to all of them, including like The Parent Trap, where I don't know if you remember, but there were the twin sisters, and that was my base programming for my twin sister programming, which was the high level programming that was used in the government to keep me from knowing what my internal twin sister, who was actually involved with the elite families and the government, was doing. I was shown lots of movies that had very profound programming, that not that the movies themselves were programs, but the way they were used was, and like the film Lost Horizons, where I was programmed to be ageless unless I left, which if you'd see the movie, you'll see that's the theme, that when you leave, you start aging. And I had a lot of survivors also have programs where they won't age as long as they stay in. The books and films and all of that, it was just one thing, one tool of programming after another, and yes, they were all mainstream.
Do you feel that films that are currently coming out are still being used for programming?
Yes, I do, and I think even at a higher level, and I think that as people continue to ignore the profound, very profound and deep effect that what children see as visual and auditory images as in childhood, what an effect it has on their entire psyche and the framework for which they set up belief systems, even if they're not programming, for the rest of their life, that we need to be mindful of what children are seeing. And I think that as yet people have yet to really look into how serious the havoc has been wreaked with children watching so much violence. So I think that if people look with the eyes of a child to the Disney films and to a lot of these things that children are watching on television and through the movies, it's horrific.
Mm-hmm. And was music used at all in your experience?
Yeah, I was even programmed with music to fall in love with my husband. And the songs were linked with my emotions in order to initiate a state of feeling like I was in love. And I watched as years went by. That I was actually the music was played to me at very important times when I was to be used for something, and I also was used within the entertainment industry and saw how some of the current and very famous and powerful musicians were programmed, and and their music and certain phrases were encoded, and oftentimes I even delivered programmed phrases from the elite to these entertainers, and delivered the words or the programmed phrases that they were to say during their performances when they were live and on stage. And I believe that a lot of people were programmed to want to be with these people, or to revere them, or get hysterical and want to see them all the time and idolize them, so that they would continue to return to these mass performances for their own programming. And it was a way of keeping groups intact that were already programmed so that they could be controlled.
Now, about your book, what motivated you initially to write a book about your experience, and why did you choose to write it as a fictional work?
I was trying to stay alive. I was running from place to place, from state to state, from place to place, trying to stay alive all by myself. And Dr. Catherine Gould recommended, I stayed in contact with her and Ted Gunderson, who's a retired FBI agent who's been helping survivors. And basically I was trying to stay alive and to be able to explain two people what was going on in order to keep myself and my children safe. And I was trying to help other survivors so that they could see, and perhaps it would ease their feeling of being alone and of feeling crazy, much in the same way that Lauren Stratford's book, Satan's Underground, had been something that, after I'd had a bunch of my memories and I read her book, I was able to realize that I wasn't alone and I wasn't crazy.
Did you feel that the book served as a kind of an insurance policy for you as well?
Yes, absolutely. It continues to, in ways that a member of the intelligence community told me. He said, because I explained I had written the book and then gotten it out all over along with my actual memories, naming the names, dates, and places with a letter stating that if anything happened to me or my children, that this information was to be made bigger, and that these people that had my information, who were public already with this issue, were to take it out wider. And then what ended up happening was it created a huge safety net for myself and my children.
Yeah, and I was going to ask why you chose not to name the names, but I think you just answered that.
Right, right. I made initially I made it under Catherine Gould's recommendation in order to stay alive, and also to make the problem understood in a more simple fashion by the general public. People really had a hard time back in those days hearing the names that I was naming, who they thought as their national icons or heroes, as doing this horrific torture to myself and my children. So I felt it was a way to help people in a very simple way understand what was going on. And
can you tell us, just in a general sense, of what kind of entertainers were involved and politicians?
Yes. World-class, internationally known comedians. Actually, my owner was a internationally renowned comedian. World leaders, presidents, judges, lawyers, politicians of all levels, famous entertainers and musicians, ministers, dentists, doctors. I mean, the list, it just doesn't stop. It goes on and on and on. And it was my experience that there are world leaders and entertainers in Hollywood and all over who are themselves programmed and are in need of healing.
And did you feel that these entertainers had intelligence connections as well?
That I would not. I have no way of knowing that. But I would say that there were some type of intelligence. Whether, I don't know what the connection was, whether it was actually our intelligence communities or what, but I would often be escorted to a very famous person's home that was an entertainer by two men in suits in a black sedan to deliver programming. So yes, I would say it was some sort of intelligence.
Right. And how widely distributed is your book, and how can people get a hold of it?
Right now, my book is, I can give you my P.O. box that people can order it from, and that's just to write a check to Brice Taylor Trust, P.O. Box 655, Landrum, Landrum, South Carolina, 29356. And I also have another book called Revivification, which is a gentle alternative memory retrieval process for trauma survivors. And so people can write both books together, including all the shipping is $25. And it's also available, Starshine is also available through any bookstores that carry New Leaf distributor books, and can be ordered in that manner.
Do you consider yourself completely free of control from your perpetrators, and have they attempted to re-access you?
Yes, I consider myself absolutely free, and I still receive harassment. Although since I've gotten my book out, it's more on a verbal level, more on a like receiving things in the mail that are an attempt to trigger my programming, or like messing with my mail and things like that.
And I'd like to go into a bit more detail about what kinds of things that you were used by your handlers for.
Uh-huh. Oh, this is a big one. I was used to deliver. I was used by a member of the National Security Agency and someone that was oftentimes close to presidents, where I was programmed with what he called mind files. And I had government mind files where I was programmed to have perfect photographic recall of documents that I was programmed to read and remember in my head it was like having a computer brain, a human computer at your access. And along with that, I was also used with these mind files in order to be like a programming or a postal bank of communication between the elite members that were bringing out the New World Order in order to keep their world plan orchestrated and organized. I was also used as a sex slave to presidents and foreign leaders and entertainers here and abroad in order to deliver programmed messages from the elite in order to keep the plan smoothly running and operating.
So this is the global elite that is attempting to implement this New World Order. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
I was also used on lower levels in my community with money laundering and all sorts of pornography, prostitution, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just like endless.
And do you have memories of the details of what they had put into what information they were keeping in your mind files?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, years of it. I spent years documenting everything. It's very classified projects and plans for the New World Order.
Yeah, and I do want to go into talking more detail about that. Can you tell us in terms of alerting the public about what kinds of things that they are planning to bring about this New World Order and what that they envision that this would be?
From what I heard on the inside, and my experience sitting among these elite people, so-called elite, certainly not the spiritual elite of our world, but the financial elite, was that their plan is of a world takeover because they feel that genetically and in every other way physically that the populations of the earth are inferior, of an inferior genetic strain. And what they are attempting to do is to bring down the population through various contrived means, which is a whole nother subject of all of its own, in order to bring these people to death so that the planet will be left pristine and untouched for their future progeny.
It might be a bit too late for that.
Yeah. They feel that and certainly I don't have the most current information. Survivors that have come out since I have more current information of the plan because I'm certain that they've had to change it and alter it in order to begin to bring it through. But I believe that what they feel is their ace in the hole this time because they've tried this many other generations, almost like a game of wits of the most intellectual and financial power brokers being able to see, what kind of game they could do here on the small minds of the planet, of these people that are unwitting victims. Even people that aren't under mind control are victims of all of this and will be in the future. as they are now, but in the future I think it'll be more. But when I was getting out, what I understood was that they were planning a complete and total economic collapse of the nation that would make the Depression of the 29s look like just child play, and that through that bringing people financially to their knees, that they could then come in and control them and bring in whatever other measures that they would want to in the guise of rescuing, when it certainly would not be that at all. And personally, I would like to put a call out to all people that are in any way spiritually connected, knowing that this plan cannot ever be able to be brought about as the people, even at the higher levels that are participating, may be participating without knowing what they've been participating in, such as members of the intelligence community who have been compartmentalized in their knowledge of what projects they were participating in. I would certainly put scientists that are inventors in that category. I would put people that are in the Masonic order that perhaps at the lower levels are serving the king at the highest levels without realizing that what they're putting their energy in, thinking that they're helping children and people that are in need of help. What they're doing actually is serving the highest levels of evil and corruption and destruction of men, women, and children. That people need to realize that that these people that are serving are turning against their own, and that we need to take back our own spiritual power and stay connected spiritually in order to know what to do and how to act and how to see the truth and how to discern what lies and propaganda and strategies have been given over the television or over movies with intentional strategies. That I sat with the men who strategized what thoughts and belief systems they were trying to get people to believe so that they could continue with the plan. And mind control was their ace in the hole this time, because they felt that there couldn't be any mess ups and no human frailty or weakness of mind or conscience if people were under mind control. So I would just ask people to please open their eyes and to begin to not just take what they see that's given out by the government, the intelligence communities as truth and reality, but to begin to question and think on their own.
Now, specifically, how do you think mind control would be used in terms of a takeover implementation?
Well, I think there are people that they have in positions of power, not only in the military, but also in political and religious circles, who are themselves under mind control and can be used as puppets to do whatever they're instructed to do from higher up levels. People think that we elect our presidents, and I've sat with the people who planned who the presidents were going to be and groomed them and told them what to do and what to say and how to say it and when to say it and when not to, and I delivered all kinds of messages of instruction to presidents and world leaders about what to do and what not to do. And I watched as people that were good people and weren't involved were manipulated, brainwashed, and controlled by persons like myself that were programmed, dressed in jewels and beautiful clothes and with all the very fancy and sophisticated sexual innuendos and techniques that I and myself, my daughter, others were programmed to do, and go in and just, if these men were at all able to be coerced, they were manipulated and then they were blackmailed. And these people that are in positions of power know how to find out and research what people's weaknesses are, whether they're sex, drugs, sexual perversion, whatever it is, financial gain. They lure them in, and once people have been forced or coerced to participate and do the dirty deed, and a lot of times it was filmed, videotaped, and documented, and then these people that were already in positions of either financial, political, or whatever power were then told, this will be public knowledge and information if you don't go along with us. So I watched people being coerced at the highest levels at parties of the elite where cocaine was flowing and drugs and alcohol, whatever anyone wanted. If you wanted sex with children, if they wanted sex with, whatever. Anything that they wanted, people were given. And it was perversion at the highest levels.
Now, when you speak of the global elite, I've just finished airing interviews with Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler. They speak of this global elite as being what's known as the Illuminati. Is that your understanding?
Actually, I couldn't name it. It was never called that on the inside, but I will go as so far to say that it's some of the old money families. And the reason I don't name names is because there are too many of them, number one. The names aren't going to help us sort out the problem, but the information is. And I was clearly told by a member of the intelligence community, White House intelligence, for 29 years that I could tell what happened, but not to name the names. And I want my children brought into safety and healing. And I believe that my children's level of healing isn't going to be much different from what the healing is going to be needed for some of these people that have been involved at the highest levels. And
just want to go back to the point about the economy. How specifically do you think they will manipulate the economy to bring it down?
I think that we've all lived in an inflated society, not just the government, but we've all been trained to use credit cards, buy on credit, and really we own virtually nothing anymore. And so if you do a crash on the financial things that people have invested in, all of it, it's all just a mind game anyway. None of it's real. It cripples the economy, and the specific means of how that is to be done, I would say probably has feelers and fingers into the IRS and to all the banking systems that are now, the world banking systems are in place, have been for years, that if you follow the money, that you'll find a lot of the answers.
So do you believe that there will be, for example, a stock market crash?
I don't like to predict these kind of things, but I would say that is a strategy that in the past I have heard and know has been used in the past. I would feel like I'd be disrespectful to people to say that I know that to be sure, but I've certainly heard it. But like I said, I've been out for a number of years, and things change and strategies change. Right. They alter them as they perhaps are uncovered or being a problem to the plan.
So what do you feel that the public can do to thwart their intentions?
I think people need to contact their local politicians and demand information be divulged about the government experiments, the medical, radiation, drug experiments, mind control experiments, all of that. I think as people start learning about the internal structure of the Masonic order and how the programming is working and how people's brainwaves can be altered and messed with even at a distance, I think people need to get very instructed and educated about what's gone on. I think people need to begin to simplify their lives and financially in all ways in order to be able to take the time to evolve spiritually and see what's really going on, to connect deeply. And unfortunately, I think that, or fortunately, I guess you could look at this in a very fortunate way, that people are going to have the opportunity to make a spiritual stance, as people were during the times of Nazi Germany, where they housed babies and people that were going to be killed due to a sick genetic belief system. I believe that that as people are able to really take a stand and understand and help, that it will turn things around. But I think that a lot's been put into place, and it's going to take some time to undo it. Obviously, with all the people that are under mind control that are going to need to be healed.
Mm-hmm. Now, from the global elite's perspective, what do they consider threats to their plan?
I think the exposure of the plan would be a threat to their plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think people being in charge of themselves and understanding that there are projects such as the HARP project that is altering the frequency of the planet and of the minds of the people that are here, and demanding that project be stopped. Instead of stopping the military from being able to hide a research and instrumentation and experimentation of weaponry that is oftentimes is unable to be seen. It's invisible, but it's damaging to the public and to the world, and to demand to know what their tax dollars are being used for, which, from my perspective, people are paying taxes in order that all this research be done on the mind control and on everything else, and they're paying for their own demise, paying for their own destruction, because they're fueling the government agencies and the military that has been given such a high priority on this earth for destruction, instead of funding education and teaching children how to think and critically analyze and empowering people. It's all been, the society is pretty much built on, still with a military mind and bent on destruction and control and power.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you had access to this information, what was their time frame for bringing this about, or did that come up?
Oh, about the financial thing?
Yep.
It was within the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe that may still be on track?
The plan was intended to be culminated by the year 2000.
Mm-hmm. And is there a particular significance to the years 1998 or 1999 in terms of their own occult belief
Yeah, I think
system?
it's the occultic numerology and all those belief systems that they've based this on. It's a perversion of Christianity. It's a perversion of Christ. Everything that I ever saw was a perversion of everything that is good.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard a number of mind control survivors talking about end times programming. Mm-hmm. Do you have any knowledge of that and what that entails?
Yeah, I had that too, where I never actually got to what my job was, but I knew that there was a job that I was programmed to have and do during those end times. And I think that people were programmed and are still programmed to create endless chaos. And I think with the general population being so ignorant about the mind control technology, about how targeted energy can affect brain waves, and about all of this higher level technology stuff, that they're blinded to all of this, and that's dangerous.
Now, do you feel that therapists and other professionals have made any headway to disable this kind of programming and to heal?
I think that the therapists that have been working diligently in this for years, and I highly honor them, and I'm very grateful, and I think that they've done a lot, and I think that they've done it against all odds, and I think they've done it as a great sacrifice professionally and in every way. And I think that certainly bringing the programming to light and to conscious awareness dismantles much of it. And I think that the EEG biofeedback technology is something that therapists can use to, instead of taking 10 to 12 to 15 years, to reintegrate someone with DID, that it can be done in a year or two without so much disruption to the person's functional life.
Now, generally, how long do you think it's taken them to actually program these people to the level that they can be used to participate in their plans?
Well, usually it's the intergenerational abuse, so children that are going to be used, usually in official levels, are programmed from birth, and it's taken years.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that starting in the 70s, children were that weren't from intergenerational families began to be programmed in daycare centers, which is where you have the McMartin preschool case and all of these cases that the children told what happened and were either initially believed and then allowed the media or the people from the inside to come in and say, no, this never happened, and have the cases turned around, or to make the children look incredible, like they were not telling the truth. But that's another question I always ask people is, just like as a child, when I told, how would I have known about all this sexual stuff unless I had seen it? I mean, adults need to logically think about how a child would ever even conceive of this kind of horror, and yet they're not just one or two children around are coming up with this, but hordes of children from all over the world. I mean, people have got to start looking at this logically, that this is not just some, stupid false memory foundation. This is something that's a real thing. Children have better things to be doing, and not the ability to create this kind of organized horror.
Mm-hmm. And you alluded to child prostitution and pornography. How closely is that connected with these global elites and the plans with the New World Order?
Well, I believe that, at least from my perspective and my experience, that the child pornography and prostitution was done for their pleasure and entertainment. My daughter and my sons were prostituted, taken to parties where the elite where anybody that wanted to have sex with them was able to go in and have sex with children. I think it's used as also an incredible fundraising ability to bring in large amounts of money as they are able to underground this child pornography into international markets where it's highly sought after and brings in a lot of funding to fund their operations.
So, in your opinion, how widespread do you think trafficking in children is going on today?
I think it's enough that if normal people knew how widespread it was, it would bring them to their knees. I think that it's like Ted Gunderson says, as an ex-member of the FBI or retired, that in California they knew exactly where all the stolen cars were, but no one had any idea about any statistics organized or in any way about where the missing children went. I mean, it's pretty bad.
What, in your opinion, can you estimate how many you think have been programmed? How many are mind control victims?
I really don't. I never personally, of my own, on the inside, heard or saw. I know there were a lot of people. I know I have met a lot of people that are healing, and I get letters from survivors from all over the world. I did a statistic I did hear from a member of the intelligence community at one time was that the presidential model project, where women were programmed to sexually service presidents and the elites, was that there were 3,000 in this country. which would mean that there would be 3,000 women, and then, as with my case, my daughter would follow in my footsteps. So she, it's like a pyramid game, where as each generation goes on, the amounts of people get larger and larger and larger as the intergenerational families continue to propagate.
And you have been in touch with quite a number of survivors. Can you speak to what kind of similarities between their accounts and geographically where they're from?
Actually, physically, they're from all over the world, and so I really haven't seen any kind of physical, everybody's from California or everybody's from Nevada. It's not like that. But people do name a lot of the same military bases. And I'll just say for myself, my daughter and myself were programmed heavily at Point Mugu Naval Base, where they had dolphin tanks and research, and there were places at Edwards Air Force Base, all sorts of different locations, but I think our commonalities are that we're all naming either major medical hospitals where arms of different research projects were done, or military bases, or NASA stations. That it's an organized picture. It's not just some little satanic cult operating here or there or somewhere else. It's all very organized. And have the people you have spoken to have they had similar experiences to you in terms of the starting from an early age and being exposed to these satanic ritual abuses, and what percentage of people are involved in more of the government mind control that you've spoken to? Actually, most of the survivors I've met have been used more at local levels, or not just prostitute, but used at not within the government, but used more at a lower level. However, I'd say there's been 10 or 12 other presidential models that I've met. I've met a lot of women who come up to me and are afraid to give me much of their story, but will say, so-and-so was also my abuser, or I remember this man. And a lot of my validation has come from not naming the names, and from many of these women who are so frightened, having never read my book or any of my information, and they find me out in the hall and corner me and name the names. And oftentimes they're some of the high-level perpetrators that were also my abusers. Mm-hmm. So I quietly validate them, and they go off and heal knowing they're not crazy. Now, I want to also talk about the criminal connections to other organized crime, and particularly trafficking in children, and wondered if you could shed any information that you had been exposed to in that regard. Well, I will explain as far as the criminal connections that my memories and my experiences as a child were heavily mob involved, as well as CIA and government, different medical universities and military bases that were used. As far as that criminal activity, how it all weaves in, I believe, is just as arms that are used in order to benefit from the child trafficking, and is able to use these children in certainly the pornography and prostitution that and to bring in other children. In a place in my book, I talk about how I was used under mind control as a child to enlist other children into an automobile in California and then these were children that as as I was aware as a child, probably did not have the background or programming or had not even been abused, but were kidnapped off the street and enticed with the use of another child to bring them in, and then once they were in the car, they were trapped and they were used, I watched as they were used in pornography and then were used in snuff films in which they were actually killed during the filming and then were disposed of in whatever manner. But then certainly this type of what some of these sick and sadistic people think of as entertainment that feeds their own perversions and their own sick senses is what has really brought in a large financial base that certainly has been used to and has been exposed by other women who have talked about these funds been used to fund the black operations, CIA, government, mind control, different military or medical experiments that were done. And I believe a lot of this is where a lot of the funding comes from for a lot of these experiments and continued research.
These ties into the criminal activities such as you mentioned, child pornography, prostitution, and also drug trafficking. How widespread do you, in your opinion, is trafficking in children?
I think it's very widespread, and I think that the public has been seriously fooled by the False Memory Foundation and a lot of the media that has gone on saying that all these cases that have come up with the preschools and different agencies around the country where children are coming forward and telling what happened to them. That does include pornography, statements of being used in sexual ways, and certainly being abused in the child's mind is being discredited. And I believe that these children that are telling the truth, that saying the same things that happened to me and a lot of other women across the country when we were children, are certainly being discredited by the media, but that from what I understand and from the first-person accounts that I hear, the people that are my age and that go back even older and then younger that are talking about the amount of children in preschool that have been programmed that may not have been intergenerational ritual abuse ties, but who have been programmed and then used with the pornography and prostitution in order to create great avenues of funding. And very large. And I think that combined with kids that are found missing off of the street and kidnapped in an attempt to use them as a means of funding, all of this horror is continues to go unchecked by the public population that finds all of this so incredulous that they don't even believe it. So here we have survivors who children who are also re-victimized by a disbelieving public and oftentimes uninformed mental health and church systems that are unable to believe that this kind of atrocity has gone on, and so they're unable to come to these children's aid or to the adult survivors who are attempting to find avenues of relief and help in order to stop this and help themselves.
Yeah, it really seems that their biggest cover-up for all of these atrocities is the public disbelief that these go on. Yes,
absolutely. It's Walter Bauert, who wrote Operation Mind Control, has a blurb in his book that says that the big secrets are protected by their incredulity, and certainly I believe that that those that strategized this plan were very well aware that when all of us started talking about these things, that just like in Nazi Germany, when people still today want to believe that a lot of those horrors didn't happen, that people would turn away in denial of what really happened because it's so horrific and incredulous.
Now, speaking of Nazi Germany, there have been a number of allegations that there has been Nazi involvement, particularly in connection with the Project Paperclip of importing Nazis after World War II into the United States. Have you come across any Nazi connections in your experience?
Yes, I haven't. And just to enlarge and expand a little bit on this Project Paperclip, Linda Hunt wrote a book about Project Paperclip in which she explained that Mark Phillips, who was an intelligence officer, had actually, and he personally told me that he was part of bringing in some of these Nazi doctors and bringing them into our country and giving them immunity, and that he was unaware at the time what the full ramification of what these people were doing within our country, but that he was aware that that was happening. So right there is the Nazi connection of how these men, who were a lot of the scientists and doctors, who had used the population of prisoners in the concentration camps as their unwitting and unwilling and horrific suffering people as their population of research, and how then they were brought to our country and put into the major universities and research centers in order to further their research on the mind control, and then were given over to the population of ritual abuse survivors in order to have now another group to experiment on, of which certainly myself and my children were a part of that also included genetic experiments that were done to me and to my children. As far as the Nazi connections that I'm aware of in my past, I am aware of my mother telling me that my father went to some neo-Nazi meetings along with my grandmother when I was just a little girl. And I know that in a lot of my recovery work, what the symbol that I kept drawing over and over was the Nazi symbol. And I saw that symbol as a child at some of the satanic ritual ceremonies that were done to me and to others, and certainly I believe that that is a very large part of all of this. And as society continues to want to even put Nazi Germany and the horrors of those people that suffered in the concentration camps under the rug and not look at it, it continues to proliferate here, even within our country, as these people are still getting away with doing the human experimentation and torturing people today.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that the experiments that were done in the Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust, that they were for the purposes of developing mind control?
Oh, definitely. In fact, last year I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and saw there's pictures of the actual brain experimentation and a lot of the research that was done. It's all there for people that have the eyes to see that it absolutely was experimentation. And there's pictures of people being experimented on.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have, in your experience, did you come across Joseph Mengele in the United States? A number of survivors of mind control have named him as being involved in their abuse in the United States, post-World War II era. Was that part of your experience?
No, actually it wasn't, Wayne, but what was there were doctors at UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute who were very instrumental in my programming, and where I reported to, oftentimes by myself as a result of responding to my programmed instruction to report there. And where my programming was checked in on and made into whatever it was that the needs were of the time. So no, the answer to that is no, but yes, there were doctors. There were doctors all over the country that I reported to in various military installations and certainly UCLA.
And a number of people I've interviewed have talked about the occult ideology of these groups that are responsible for perpetrating mind control. What do you think the significance of that is?
Well, I think that historically, I've been able now to read back and to understand that the occult plan for this New World Order has gone back generations and was built on very heavily through all kinds of what seemingly look like religious ideology, and I believe that that the occult belief system and the evilness of that and the destructiveness and certainly being interlaced with superstitious beliefs is what continues to allow these things to proliferate as people's belief systems, that they believe in all of this perversion gives them the power to take it forward into these times. And I think that it's like for the Satanists to believe that these satanic rituals and all of the perversions that are done during those rituals that allow them in their belief system to believe that they're gaining power by doing all these horrors and stealing energy from children and babies and all of the different ways that they believe as they're killing, that it allows them to continue on. And until these belief systems are cleaned up and until people that are good people on the planet begin to be able to weed through their own denial that this level of atrocity could still be going on today, I think that that's where the problem lies. It's the people that are perpetrating still this occultic belief that meets up with the denial of even Christians who can't believe this and say they're frightened by it and don't want to deal with it. And so it's been my experience in watching that as good people do nothing, that the children continue to be tortured and abused.
And do you think this ties in, just in a general sense, with these groups that have been using mind control and in their motivation towards more and more power and wealth? Like, I get asked, well, don't these old money family groups have enough power already? What is motivating them to perpetuating these atrocities? Well,
what I saw, from what I saw from the inside of sitting, in a group of these men who were strategizing, is it's almost like some of these people are so unbalanced intellectually that they and certainly fueled by whatever abuses that and unloving, uncaring, horrific abuse systems that they may have come from, that they view and believe very strongly in the intellect and not feelings or any kind of caring or love or anything like that, where that they more or less look at this as a game of their intellect, sort of like a group of powerful men sitting in a room thinking up strategies of how they might be able to control the world and what benefits they might be able to have. But from what I saw, it seemed like it was a big game to them. And in fact, they used, with me, and part of my programming was a chess game where they used different pieces of that chess game to represent to me different world leaders and how this was how the game was played, and it was all used in a very symbolic way. But I believe that these people are very intelligent and are able to strategize and come up with a plan, but it's almost as if the stakes had to get raised higher, just like in a poker game of, who could control who and how successful they would be in seeing how they can control the minds of the entire planet.
Now, I want to ask you if you are aware of any direct government ties to some of these satanic cults that seem to have proliferated across North America, and have a lot of survivors have come forth in their accounts of their experiences with these cults. And I suppose there's a lot of different levels there in terms of their involvement within the overall government mind control picture. But I want to ask if you knew of any direct government ties to some of these cults.
Well, the government ties, I believe, to the cults are the politicians that I believe have realized and are very aware that the people in the cults, and especially in the satanic cults that are born and have multiple personality disorder from the abuse that they suffer within their families, are certainly prime candidates because of their dissociative abilities and inability to stay present in a unified whole way with their minds to even know what's going on. I believe that so through the politicians and then through the military as the bases were used with a lot of the equipment for the mind control, and certainly was used as a way to cover up these experiments by saying that they were military projects. There's a base in California. It still is. Point Mugu Naval Base is on the coast there. It was real close to my house where myself and my children reported. And certainly that base was, until recently, was actually armed with a man with a gun in the tower. And, you want to ask people what, in my recovery, I would ask people, why would you think that a military base here in California on the coast would need to have, men with submachine guns standing up in the guard tower? And so I believe that the military was used as a branch of the government in order to be able to house these projects in a way that they could be kept secret from the public, and yet here the public is paying taxes and actually funding these research projects in ways that they have no idea where their money is going, paying their tax dollars to actually support these secret government projects, of which people are just now beginning to come forward and through the Freedom of Information Act be able to demand some of these projects be brought to light. I think the government ties are very strong of certain individuals within the government who have certainly been a part of this New World Order plan. And from what I saw with the presidents all being involved with their Masonic connections, and certainly some of them higher Masonic connections than others, and with the tip of the iceberg being up with the level of Masonic ability to be to 33rd degree Masons, certainly where the mind control technology is hidden. I believe that this branches out into a lot of top hierarchy of a lot of organizations, and not just the government, but goes also now into the major corporations of the world, where a lot of the corporate heads have been manipulated into the system. So it's where there is talent, money, and power and control. A lot of this has worked its way in with the secrecy aspect, allowing it to continue to remain secret.
Also, do you have any inside information about their control over the media and their connections there and how they manipulate media?
Yes, absolutely. I was amongst them when they were even planning in the like in the late 60s and 70s, when they were planning strategies of how information would go into the newspapers, and I listened as they talked about the major families who owned some of the newspapers, and how through owning a lot of the major media, which I believe now is probably pretty complete if people were to look back and be able to trace the histories of a lot of the media, would be able to see that this is all pretty much locked up, and that these things are censored when any of these subjects even if they would attempt to work their way into the media, would be covered up. I know one intelligence officer told me that there was a Russian intelligence officer that was being interviewed on television, and they asked him a question about something, and he said, well, the Americans have won the war of the mind. And they whisked him off the air, and he never even showed back up. That was it, and it never went any farther. So I believe that the media is in a large cover-up right now, and people are listening and hearing a lot of stories that have been strategized to be what, in an attempt to have them believe what these people want them to believe, instead of actually getting the truth of what's gone on.
Now, the media currently is creating a lot of furor over this latest Clinton scandal. I wondered if you could comment on that, and if there is any indication that any of these women that are coming forward have been used like you have been.
Well, I would say that for myself, as certainly as a presidential model, and also speaking on behalf of other presidential models and women that I have spoken to within the last week or so, we all feel quite a victory that his reputation is being challenged, and that the truth is being brought forth. And I would like to, commend Paula Jones and even stand with her as knowing that this is a reality, and that this man needs to be stopped in his sexual perversions. And I would say that personally, for me, I was devastated when he was reelected, and I should and do try to remind myself all the time that the presidents really aren't elected. But I think that it is going to take the Americans of the world to take back this country, and to really research and find out what is going on in order to stop it, and to realize that our leaders, even if they're not in control of themselves, may have an agenda here that is not for the good of the whole.
Now, do you feel that this scandal may have possibly been engineered against Clinton by another power group with not good intentions either?
Right, and certainly, Wayne, I have no way of knowing that. I think that this man has perpetrated more horror to women on this planet, as well as a lot of the violence that's gone on, that continues to, in its attempt to be leaked out through alternative media sources, and that the American public still is so, I don't know if they're so busy trying to earn a living for their families that they don't have time to really research what their leaders are doing. But it seems like people have, up until now, been pretty short-sighted. And I certainly think that there are and have to be good people within the White House and within the intelligence community who may not know what is going on and don't understand the mind control or the levels of how it's been used to manipulate, and certainly may be behind bringing out some of these scandals or allowing them to leak at least some of the truth into the press. And I think it's a wonderful thing that at least our president is being called into check about some of the allegations that are made repeatedly against him as far as his sexuality and his adultery and all the perversions that follow it.
And in your experience, is Clinton any different than other presidents in that regard?
No.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you feel is necessary to bring all of this into more of a public limelight and exposing these atrocities?
I think that it's going to take a lot of education for people, and I think it's going to take the public waking up and coming out of denial about the level of evil that people are able to perpetrate on other people. And I think it's going to be the people are going to need to start taking the survivor account into a belief arena in order to stop what has gone on, because everybody is going to be a victim of this. Certainly the victims of mind control have suffered immensely through years of torture and trauma, but society also is a victim of this, because until people are reintegrated and deprogrammed, they're a threat to peace in the society. As people well know, the programming that was done was not as effective and able to control people as they thought, and as people break down, their programming breaks down, it's a problem for society as people become violent. We find children that are killing their parents, and we find that behind that is satanic abuse, but it's not allowed into the court system, and it's the reality of this has been covered up in so many different ways that the public isn't getting the truth of what's really happened.
And what plans do you and other survivors of this have in terms of bringing this into more of a public view?
Well, certainly, Wayne, I speak out whenever I have a chance, whether it be radio, television, workshops, different conferences that I speak at all over the nation and abroad. And that is certainly one avenue of giving information. Certainly writing books, and I always encourage other survivors to write what happened to them and get it out. And I think that another presidential commission needs to be brought where a greater number of women are able to come forward with their stories, to stand with Valerie Wolf and her survivor clients who were so courageous to step forward and open the door on the mind control experiments. I think it's going to take a grassroots movement of women who have been through this to expose it and stop it, and I think that would be a very powerful avenue.
Brice, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us in this radio series. I know it takes a lot of courage to come forth as you have, and I wish you all the strength in your ongoing struggle to bring this to light.
Oh, thank you, Wayne. I really appreciate the opportunity of spending time sharing my story with you. Thanks.
Thank you. You've been listening to an interview with Brice Taylor, former presidential model mind control slave, and Brice is also the author of a fictionalized account of her book, of her life rather, her book Starshine, One Woman's Valiant Escape from Mind Control. She claims that she has been abused while under the influence of mind control by presidents, politicians, old money power brokers, and entertainers, and these people used her as a sex slave and human computer, photographically remembering classified documents on secret projects related to a New World Order implementation. Next week, we're going to bring you an interview with Gail Fisher-Taylor, a Toronto-based therapist for ritual abuse survivors, in this ongoing series on mind control.